Riley Everyday is back with a brand new series counting down the top 10 most intriguing teams ahead of the 25-26 season. And I'm looking specifically at programs with heavy roster turnover that could lead to a variety of different outcomes. I've got some very special guests helping me break it all down. Can't wait for y'all to hear them. And Riley Everyday is brought to you by Rowback, my go-to for performance gear. They've got hoodies, polos, quarter zips, athletic shirts, and shorts. Whatever you need, they have you covered. As you can see, I am wearing the Hezi Performance hoodie, and I love this hoodie so much. It is so comfortable and versatile. It's great for casual wear. It's great for active wear. Make sure to get yourself one and use promo code SleepersMedia20 for 20% off your first order over at rowback.com. Let's get into the show. And we are back on Riley Everyday, counting down the most intriguing teams in the country. As a reminder, we're looking at teams who are currently sitting outside of the consensus top 15, who added a host of newcomers and therefore have a variety of outcomes, both on the high and lower ends. Today we're talking about NC State. This Wolfpack team, of course, they welcomed in Will Wade this past spring, one of the biggest hires of the coaching cycle. And I have none other than Zach Kifer here with me to talk about his Wolfpack. You might remember him from the first round of Sleepers Got Talent. Just a good dude who I've enjoyed connecting with. Of course, we have that North Carolina connection, even if we went to rival schools, still got that home state chemistry. Yeah,
Yeah,
you could. Yeah, we'll lock in despite the pack symbol being thrown
we'll
up.
lock
But
in.
Zach, appreciate having you on, man. How you doing?
Good. How are you? I appreciate you having me.
Doing well, man. Excited to talk about this team because when I look at what Wade has done, of course, it's essentially a brand new roster, and I see some high upside pieces plus the proven star with Darion Williams. But I do think there are some potential potholes here that could trip them up with not even just being a top 25 team. I think that there's a possibility, but even getting into the dance when we know in recent years we've seen really just about four or five ACC teams getting a bid the past few years. It's not exactly easy to do it in this league. And so I'm excited to get your thoughts on them and bounce some of my ideas off of you. But we have a couple different categories we are going through, and it starts with the top newcomer. I want to who do you think? I mean, it's probably the obvious answer. Is there anyone other than Darion Williams?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Darion Williams first and foremost. Obviously, he was the big get, top five transfer. But I think sneakily, freshman Matt Abel is going to end up being a really important piece for us. Not quite sure if he's going to end up starting game one, but I wouldn't be surprised if end of season we're looking at him as like easily the second best player on this team because like so far throughout the summer all the highlight clips I've been seeing, he's been killing it in practice, and he's going to all these camps, whether it be Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, and like taking home MVP. And like this is a dude who was committed to Miami, obviously decommitted when Jim Larinaga got fired, and kind of just picked up out of the blue right when Will Wade got the hire. And I was like, who is this guy? I started watching him. I was like, this dude's got some serious talent.
Yeah, well, I might have you hold that thought on Abel for a second because trust me, we will get to him. In terms of Williams, though, what do you like about his game and where do you envision Will Wade using him?
I think he's just going to be like our all around player. Like I think he's going to be seen as like a spot up guy, run the offense through him in the post, pick and pop guy. I think we could even see some 4 or 5 ball screens with him and ven-allen Lubin. At the end of the day, like I think he's going to end up being sort of like our do it all guy. Like he's going to end up being looked at as our 1A guy, and I have no doubt that he has the talent. I just question how long will it take for him to be like that solidified guy because even at Texas Tech, he wasn't the 1A guy. It was obviously JT Top and he was like second fiddle. So I really wonder how long that transition period is going to be for him to really be that 1A guy.
I'm with you on that completely. I would say that sort of is the only question is can he be the primary option? Because I mean, there's almost nothing on the court he can't do. If you watch the way that Texas Tech used him, like, I mean, he would bring the ball up the court. I thought there were times where he had the type of vision and passing skill where he would truly pass JT Toppin open. Almost looked like a point guard. You know how a really good point guard, he sees things unfolding before it happens. It wasn't always these cheap assists where it was like, okay, Toppin's doing most of the work. It's like, no, you saw him running the court. You got the ball to him before he got there and set him up for an easy dunk. So I get some of the concerns about him being the 1A. I don't really think he's going to have any issue translating. I would anticipate him averaging probably 16, 17 points a game, 6 or 7 boards, and probably 3 or 4 assists.
Yeah.
I guess if I wanted to play devil's advocate, The only question mark I might have is why did Texas Tech let him go when I think Texas Tech has really good NIL, and I would assume they could have paid him whatever he like was demanding in the open market. That truly is my only question, which I think is still getting a little devil's advocate on my part. I think he's a proven stud, and I would be shocked if he's not a first team All ACC guy.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clearly right now, like ACC Player of the Year race. It's probably him and Cam Boozer, in my opinion, right now before the season starts.
And Caleb Wilson, we'll throw him in there. But yeah, him
Yeah,
and
we can.
Cam Boozer, I would say are the two favorites. Let's move on to the swing player. And here I'm looking for the newcomer who could do exactly that, could change the fate of this team. Maybe he is that extra spark to get them in the tournament or even help them get on a bit of a run when the calendar turns to March.
Yeah, I went with like an overall position. I went with the two guard slash three
Hmm.
guard. So I went with Terrence Arsenault, Matt Abel, and Alan Breed. I really think like Darion Williams is going to end up being our 1A guy. But I think obviously Trey Hallman is a proven guard, but he's not a scoring punch per se. I
Hmm.
really think Matt Abel, Terrence Arsenault, or Alan Breed is going to have to like step up and be that like real scoring option at the guard position.
I think you're on the right track there. I would throw Paul McNeil in that mix as well, just because I'm a Paul McNeil believer. But I went Abel. Clearly, you hit on a lot of the points I was wanting to touch on in terms of even just some of the camps he's been a part of. I don't know if you follow No Ceilings, but they do some of my favorite
Yeah.
NBA draft coverage, and they had a write up from the Formula Zero, the Damian Lillard camp, and said that Abel was one of the standouts with his athleticism popping. I think you watch him in the open court, like he can yam on somebody. And when you pair that with he feels like a safe bet to be a good spot up shooter. I mean, if you envision even Darion Williams, creating in the mid post or the low post playing his booty ball style, like Abel should be able to feast on those kickouts. And but even beyond that, I think he's a bit underrated on ball. Like as I watched some of his tape, he was the kind of player who I was thinking, this guy would have gotten 15 plus shots a night if Kevin Keats was still the coach. Because that's like the devil with Keats. We knew that there were always going to be shot happy guards who could do whatever they want. Sometimes you have the higher end with DJ Horn and Terquavion Smith. Other times it doesn't work out as well. But I am really curious to see how Wade deploys him, just because if you look at what he did at McNeese these past 2 years, this last season they had 7 guys who scored 8 points or more. The year before, they had 5 guys who scored 8 or more points. And he's had a history. He's let guys like Shahada Wells cook at McNeese 2 years ago, and he had Cam Thomas, of course, in his LSU glory days. But you've seen it be a little more balanced attack. Do you have any thoughts on that or any insight for just exactly what he's looking for out of his perimeter guys in terms of scoring and even roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to end up being a big like balanced attack. Ultimately, like I think I don't know if Abel, even though I think he's going to end up being the second best player come season end, is going to have like a huge scoring difference between him and the third guy.
Hmm.
I think it ends up gonna it's going to end up being a balanced attack, but I just think that two guard with those guys and Paul McNeil are going to end up having to be like one of those guys are going to have to stand out as like the second option probably, especially in the ACC.
For sure. I'm with you on that. Let's talk NC State's biggest strength.
I went with their lineup versatility. I think that they have a potential to run out a bunch of different lineups. I think clearly the main lineup that they're going to end up running out, especially with ven-allen Lubin, is a small ball lineup. They
Hmm.
clearly don't have a ton of size, but I think I mean, Scotty Abubi, the backup center, he can give you 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes a game where you want to run big. But even then, like I think Darion Williams could run even some small ball three, small ball five. He could even scale down to the three a little bit.
Hmm.
You got Jerry Dang, who's a long sort of like 3 and D sort of wing. Quadir Copeland's a 6'6" guard. I think there's like a ton of different lineups that you could run with this roster that they've got that could throw a bunch of wrenches in defenses' plans.
Hmm. I went similarly, more so with the guard depth specifically. So I guess you could tie that into some versatility as well. But when I'm looking at guys like Trey Holloman, who was a point of attack defender in spurts for a top 5 defense last year, he's going to guard. And even you kind of look at even when Michigan State has struggled in recent years, they're always really good at guarding the 3 point line. And I think that's a system thing where, Izzo's going to demand a lot out of his guys, and he can take those practice habits and that mindset to Raleigh. And then, of course, I think what's more tantalizing, though, is the length with guys like Copeland. I mean, Copeland was a monster defensively at Syracuse. I remember watching him play against UNC regularly and being like, dude, this guy is all over the court. And, of course, played for a defensive heavy I guess a team that prioritize forcing a ton of turnovers, underweight at McNeese. I think he will continue to wreak havoc on that end as well. And then Abel and Arsenault both. I mean, Abel's listed at 6'5". I think Arsenault's 6'6". Again, another player coming from a tremendous defensive coach. You see the vision there very easily. Where I think even though there are better ball handlers in the ACC than there are the Southland. And I don't think they'll force turnovers at the same velocity that they did, playing in the low major ranks. I think there's still plenty of things there that will translate in terms of how Wade likes to play with turning up the pressure and limiting your possessions by just making it hard to get the ball past half court. Like we saw it work pretty well in the SEC a few years ago at LSU. And yeah, I really like this guard group and the toughness, the defensive versatility they bring.
Yeah, that was definitely my second strength was probably going to be their team defense overall, just because all the guys they got from the portal, whether it be Holloman, Terrence Arsenault, they're coming from teams who that their identity was defense, so they're going to definitely translate to that to NC State.
Yep, yep. So let's talk about the biggest concern.
Uh, it's got to be the size
Hmm.
for me. I mean, ven-allen Lubin is the smallest projected starting center in the ACC at 6'8", alongside VT. Their backup center, Scotty Booby, I think I'm pronouncing that right, from Wyoming. He's 6'10", but he only played 10 minutes a game in the Mountain West. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to rely on him to actually be like a real contributor, especially in the ACC. So I think when it comes down to it, I mean, Wade did a good job in the Southland with the small lineup that he had, but it's a different conference in the ACC. Like, you're going to be playing a lot bigger competition on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, that is my exact concern. Specifically, I would say interior defense. And that's looking at some of Wade's defensive numbers at McNeese over the years. Like every single season while he was there, they were in the top 25 in defensive turnover rate. They like to pressure. They like to get steals. They're going to do run and jumps and any sort of like obscure traps that he can throw at you. But the past 3 years, actually, it might even go back further. His teams have been top 50 in block rate. And I think that is, yeah, his past 3 years, his last two at McNeese and his final season at LSU, teams were top 55 in the country in block rate. And I think it makes it a lot easier to force those turnovers and play aggressively when you have that shot blocker anchoring the back end. I know they didn't have much size on McNeese. I think that you could get away with that in the Southland in the way that you can in the ACC. And even Lubin, to me, I will say, I'm sure there are some NC State fans out there who think it's sour grapes or whatever. I was not a fan of his when he played at UNC. I found him exceptionally frustrating to watch. I thought defensively he left a lot to be desired in terms of positioning and just kind of looking like he knew what his role was. And that is by far my biggest concern is if you have to lean on him for 25 minutes a game, let's say at the five, are you going to have any sort of rim protection there? And he'll benefit from Williams, who's a good team defender, and I think better size on the perimeter. But I still just have questions about if he's your last line of defense. I just don't know if he's going to offer much in terms of resistance.
Yeah, I think what favors Lubin is that, and I don't know, I question how well he's going to be able to move laterally, but he is going to be switching heavy. So he may not be relied on rim protection all that much just because of the
Hmm.
type of defense that Will Wade likes to play on a consistent basis. But, if he does get caught up in the paint, I do question how well he's actually going to be able to protect the rim.
Yeah, yeah, and I know talk to some people who see that Darius Days I think that was Wade's last year at LSU where they ran him at center a lot and he was 6'6", but I do think Lubin is listed at a very generous 6'8". I think at the FIBA event 3 years ago he measured 6'5" and 3/4 without shoes. So I'm always just again watching him in person. I think he's might not quite be 6'8", but. It worked with Darius Days a few years ago, but I would even say basketball has skewed to be bigger since then. You're not really seeing obviously like the Warriors no longer having their dynasty, and even those Rockets teams back in the late 2010s that had PJ Tucker as the center. Like you don't see NBA teams like that anymore, where they're skewing bigger, where pretty much everyone on the court is 6'4", 6'5", or taller, and a lot of times you're seeing your four man is like 6'10", 6'11" in some cases, and you're seeing that move down to the college game as well, where guys are more often 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", playing that four spot. So that's my concern. We'll see if Wade schemes something to balance that or to cover up that deficiency. Last question we'll hit on. Zach, do you think your NC State Wolfpack more likely to hit their ceiling or their floor?
So I feel like there's a big question in terms of what NC State's ceiling actually is. I feel like a lot
Mhm.
of people have consistently put them at like third or fourth in the ACC. And at the end of the day, just because of how like open the ACC is, I do think they're going to end up more likely hitting their ceiling. I know we talked about the small ball lineup and how that could end up being an issue, especially in the ACC. I went back and looked, and like you mentioned it with Darius Days, Will Wade hasn't had a ton of tall guys. Even back to LSU, like Efton Reed started in his last season a little bit at center, and he had Nas Reed before that a couple years ago. But in his 2 seasons with Trendon Watford, and I know Trendon Watford was an NBA player, but he
Mhm.
was the tallest starter, and he went 21-10 and 19-10. And 21-10, they were second in the ACC before COVID canceled the rest of the year. So he's had proven success in power
Mhm.
conferences,
Mhm.
playing smaller lineups, and I even think back then that SEC was probably stronger than what the current ACC is right now. So at the end of the day, like I just trust Will Wade as a coach. This roster is definitely talented for as many questions that's being brought along with it. I think it's more likely that it hits the ceiling.
Mhm. I think I'll go ceiling as well. My only caveat is I think the ceiling's lower than consensus. I'm expecting them more. I would be pretty surprised if they were third in the ACC, but I think fourth or fifth seems realistic and obtainable. I believe Wade will outcoach most of his counterparts in the ACC. I think they'll have a coaching advantage night in, night out, and more often than not. My questions are mainly Holloman. I should say this more on the offensive side with Holloman. I mean, you can't get away. Sub 40% shooter last year. Lubin, I think, has some limitations. You really don't want him doing anything outside of 3, 4 feet from the basket. And beyond that, I think it just puts the onus on Abel being awesome pretty quickly, or Arsenault breaking out, or Paul McNeil breaking out. And I think it's a good bet that one of them emerges as the secondary scorer next to Williams. But I just think there's some limitations at the with Holloman offensively and even Lubin at the five that keep me from thinking that like there's this team is a lock to be in the tournament or a lock to be a top four team in the ACC. But I think there's a pretty good chance they get there.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, for us NC State fans, I think I can speak on behalf of the fan base. As long as we can make the tournament, I think that's all we're hoping for in year one.
Would be a good season for sure. Zach, I appreciate your time, and again, thank you for being on Riley every day, talking through these intriguing teams ahead of the season.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you.